Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi says they're keeping a close eye on the situation in the Middle East. Now, if any new action harm Iran's national interest, Raisi says the country will respond even more strongly. There are concerns, of course, the situation may escalate. Let's speak now to Ambassador Sisa Ngombane, who's a retired senior South African diplomat who was actually recalled from Israel, given what's actually taking place there. The ambassador joins us now live for his reaction. Mr. Ambassador, it's lovely to have you on the SABC News channel. Thanks very much indeed for making time. You know, we were warned that the situation could escalate, and there are really concerning signs of that now unfolding. How worried are you that the situation will, in fact, get out of control?
No, thank you for having me. Let me start by saying, yes, I'm retired. My last post was Madagascar. But let me just reiterate what our Foreign Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, said, that at this juncture, it is critical that restraint is exercised by Israel and by Iran. The problem really since last year, October 7, has not been resolved. South Africa has repeatedly called for a ceasefire in Gaza. The war in Gaza continues, starvation continues of children and of women. So you've got a catastrophe that has been unfolding since October 7. Now, added to this, then you have the layer of this direct conflict now, exchange between Israel and Iran. Now, the problem really is that there's a lot of forces in that area, that is the Mediterranean Sea, and that miscalculations or anything can really lead to an unimaginable expediting of the conflict. So it is correct that Dr. Pandor said, let's call for restraint. Let there be a ceasefire in Gaza, and then we'll proceed from there.
Right. I wonder who you reckon is best placed to mediate for that restraint, especially because the United Nations itself has been pulled into this as a non-neutral actor, if you like, by Israel, I beg your pardon. Israel has made all kinds of accusations against the UN, looking almost to discredit its standing. Given that, who do you reckon then is best placed to mediate for the restraint that you're calling for?
Clearly, despite the difficulties, the multilateral system has always said the UN has got the primary responsibility. I think the last time resolutions were tabled as the Security Council to calling for this ceasefire in Gaza first. And those resolutions were vetoed by the United States of America. So we have a problem again where powers with veto power exercise that veto to make sure that the UN system is paralyzed. But nonetheless, it is still the only mechanism that we have. And I think we have to press on bilaterally and let the citizens press on their countries. I think the calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, for instance, have been mounting globally in every capital. And that's also the starting point that the citizens must be involved to say, we are watching you, your actions in the United Nations. You have the power to stop this.
Absolutely. The conflict in the Middle East, some might say, is a story of two tales. On the one hand, of course, there's such great suffering on the ground, especially in the Gaza Strip, the enclave. But also, it's been a really interesting story around the power and influence of multilateralism, or the lack thereof, because there had been so many different attempts, as you've mentioned, to try and have discussions that will lead to some kind of cessation of hostilities. But even at that level, it doesn't seem we've received a lot of success. Just drawing from your experience as an ambassador who's worked in Israel, I wonder how upbeat you are feeling at the moment about the impact of multilateralism. Is that the way to still solve this?
I think we have to accept, I think the experience that we have had, I think if you draw back to South African experience, For several times, this issue of South Africa, the apartheid regime, came to the Security Council. It was vetoed. But at the General Assembly was able to make its voice very strongly to say this is wrong. Now, you need to leverage all that. On top of that, you also had the non-aligned movement, the other organizations, the African OAU, and then the African Union. You need all these organizations to be really seized with this matter. It can't be that's like something happening in a corner somewhere where nobody sees, because the consequences are dire for all of us. We need to be involved. Also, as I said, as citizens of the world, I think we have heard people saying, let's go to the streets to press on our leaders to do the right thing. Because until the politicians feel that they are under pressure to do the right thing, they will continue to take decisions that are contrary to our interests.
Yeah, in fact, that's been the perception around what might be fueling Benjamin Netanyahu's behavior, the, of course, Prime Minister of Israel. He's got a lot of domestic issues around his own political career in the country, and this is being used in some ways as a distraction. Again, from your time in that country, how far-fetched or not do you reckon that theory is?
No, I've seen several demonstrations in Tel Aviv, the capital, and of course, there's always been a cloud over the current prime minister, and some have said actually an election should have been called. Now, you have a situation where the population, even in Israel, is saying, no, we have enough of this, and therefore the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding by a thread. And of course, it is easy to mobilize support if you are saying, now I'm facing a war, the country is facing a war. It's not a time to be each other. Now, this is obviously a tactic that is used to keep the population supporting the current regime.
Sure. Really concerning that. You know, if we actually even date even further back into history, the situation in the Middle East is one that's been of concern for quite some time, especially because, again, at the level of perceptions, there'd always been this view that the animosity between Israel and Iran is nothing but a proxy war between these other hegemonic powers in the global north, right? So Iran is on the side of the likes of Russia, Israel is on the side of the US, and it's actually these superpowers using these countries in the Middle East to wage war against each other. Is that, do you reckon, still happening?
I think the view I hold, and which is held by many people, is that we have to accept Iran went through a revolution in 1979. A revolution that toppled the Shah of Iran. A Shah of Iran, which was the protege of the American government. Now, with that, of course, American interests, oil interests, and other interests were threatened. Now, as you know that Iran, the new revolutionary government that came into power in 1979, said they don't recognize Israel. Israel is a creation by Western nations on Arab lands. And therefore, they have made it clear for themselves that they won't accept an Israeli state. And therefore, that itself made Iran to be an arch enemy of course, the greatest ally of the United States, Israel, and draw Israel and America to be counter Iran. Iran has tried to be independent. They've tried to say, we support those who are struggling for their freedom. They've been in Syria, and they claim that their consulate in Damascus was attacked. And it is true that Israeli forces have been going in and out in areally to attack even Damascus. So these things are happening, but the origin, of course, is that Iran, the people rose against the American interests in Iran.